There are certain times where political theater is called for. If certain communities are attacked, I will stand up and fight for them on the floor. But all I want to do is improve lives and get things done. And I think that's missing in Congress, and that's what I want to bring to the table.
Hi, my name is Owen Samos, and welcome to Youth in the Booth. Today, my guest is Senator Becky Whitley. How are you doing?
Good, thanks for having me.
So, if you don't know, Senator Whitley has lived most of her life here with her family in our district of CD2 here in New Hampshire, where you've devoted yourself to helping women, children, and working families as a disabilities rights lawyer, climate organizer, community activist, child health policy expert, and New Hampshire State Senator. You've worked to improve New Hampshire's Medicaid program for a better maternal and infant health outcomes, and you consider yourself a champion for reproductive freedom here in the state. Welcome to Youth in the Booth, Becky.
Thanks so much for having me. This is a blast.
So, I've heard, down the grapevine, you are running for U.S. House of Representatives here in CD2. Is this correct?
It is correct. You heard correct. Less than a week ago, I announced that I'm running for Congress here in CD2. So CD2 is a really big district. It goes all the way from the bottom of the state all the way up to the Canadian border, which is really exciting. I've already been able to head up north. I was in Gorham earlier this week. I've been to Keene this week. Of course, here in Concord with you today. So it's been an exciting week. I'm spending my time, getting out and talking with as many people as possible.
So already traveling around,
Absolutely.
getting to know people.
Absolutely.
One of my questions about that, as you may already experience here in the New Hampshire Senate, that there's a political polarization happening and becoming, parties getting more distance and distance, and that will happen in Washington as well. How do you feel like you're going to navigate this issue?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, what we're seeing now is a lot of polarization. Personally, I think, we're seeing sort of MAGA Republicans are the ones that are creating the dysfunction in Congress. But look, here in New Hampshire, I've been in the Senate now for 4 years. My party has been in the minority, but I've never stopped that. I've never let that stop me from actually getting stuff done. I think very important to me that we are working with each other across the aisle, but by just looking at each other as humans, right? I have colleagues in the Senate where we may disagree vehemently about reproductive freedom, but if they want to work with me on improving the lives of children and families, I will do that. And I have done that. For example, Senator Sharon Carson is a colleague of mine on the other side of the aisle, but we sit next to each other on the floor. We sit next to each other in Judiciary Committee. She's a mom, I'm a mom. She has a vegetable garden, I have a vegetable garden. Look, and we just connect as humans and as moms, and we use that relationship to get things done. And that's exactly what I want to do in Congress. I want to use my lived experience as a working mom and bring that to D.C. to try to get change. For example, in New Hampshire, I've been working a lot on the child care crisis. The child care crisis is that, there are a lot of families that can't find child care, and even if they can, it's totally unaffordable. We've been doing a lot on that in the state. In the last budget cycle, I secured over $60 million for childcare. But look, we need a national solution. So what I want to do in Congress is, find a permanent fix for the childcare crisis. And we have to do it in a bipartisan way.
So you want to take the experience that you've taken in New Hampshire Senate and bring those ideals and finding a common ground with your fellow colleagues, no matter what side of the political aisle they're on, and bring that to Congress.
I just want to get stuff done, right? Politics is a weird place, but what I've found success is in just, focusing on solutions, and, that's what I've always done, right? There are certain times where political theater is called for. If certain communities are attacked, I will stand up and fight for them on the floor. But all I want to do is improve lives and get things done, and I think that's missing in Congress, and that's what I want to bring to the table.
Exactly. Now, you were mentioning you are a mom.
Yeah.
And what is New Hampshire Moms Caucus?
Oh, okay. So last session, we saw a need to come together as moms and build power, right? Because personally, I think moms have a whole heck of a lot of power. There's not a lot of younger folks in the State House, and so we kind of stick together. Even though I'm in my mid-40s, I get to be young in New Hampshire politics, at least for another decade. So we kind of stick together because there are some challenges trying to raise a family, build a career, and serve in the State House. And so we really felt it was important to come together and build some power. And we did. So we came together really with local elected officials, state level, to talk, to support each other, and also to move policy forward. So last year we passed the New Hampshire Momnibus. This is a bill I introduced that had a whole lot of different pieces, but it was about improving maternal health care. Right. It was about helping moms get back to work if they want. So the Moms Caucus, is still building, but it has been really such a huge support for me and so many others in the State House.
Because you've talked about in the past, some of the difficulties of being a working mom while working in the New Hampshire Senate. Do you think this will still be something that you'll have to work through and talk about when you get elected to Congress?
Yeah. So I think it's particularly challenging in New Hampshire because we actually don't get paid. We're one of the only legislatures in the country where we don't pay our legislatures, right? We're a citizen legislature. And that works for some folks, but it results in a different type of representation. So a lot of folks who are able to serve in the State House are older, retired, maybe a little bit wealthier because they have that base. Right. So it's hard for young people to be in office. A lot of things actually had to happen for me to be able to run. I have a very supportive spouse. My mom lives in town. I have one child as opposed to 2 or 3. I mean, a lot of these things had to line up for me to be able to serve.
It's a family operation, though.
It's a family operation, and it's a family sacrifice. I think in Congress, I think it's going to be the same thing. There are certain barriers to service. I think you get a whole lot more support when you're in Congress than you do, in state office. We really do a lot on our own. But yeah, it's certain challenges that I'll definitely have to face there too.
What do you believe is a way for the United States to engage with global issues, really, that affect young people, like climate change?
Yeah, that's a huge and important question because you all are the future and you're going to be taking over politics and leadership, and you're a huge voting base too, my friends. Like you all, if we get every single person who's eligible to vote to the polls, like that can deliver some incredible progress. So what I know is that when I'm talking to younger people, they care about climate and they are scared about the future. They feel like their leaders and their parents aren't paying enough attention. And I 100% agree. It is true that, generations after you, we aren't taking it as seriously as we should. When my son was born, I stepped away from practicing law and I was able to do community organizing with parents, trying to get them to care about climate change and to take political action. And to take political action based on their own values, that they care about their kids and they care about the future, right? So it's not too late. We have solutions that are available. We just need the political will, right? So if politicians are talking about climate and are being really bold about solutions, I'm very hopeful that young people will step into the fray. I also think a key part of getting young people involved is for them to see themselves in politicians. It is still the case in Congress. It's a gerontocracy, right? Yeah. It's a different generation that is in charge. Now that's changing. Like look at Hakeem Jeffries, who's now in the leadership in the House. Catherine Clark, who's in leadership also. The next generation is taking over, and we need to continue that, right?
And it's inevitable eventually.
That's inevitable
and
eventually.
We need to help prepare the next generation.
That's right.
Into this role.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
And obviously, you're talking about with climate change, it's something that may not affect some of the older generations now, but undoubtedly will affect some of the younger generations. And it's not just the responsibility to be passed on to younger generations. For a lot of people, they believe that action should start now.
Yes.
And I assume you agree with that.
I do, and it should have started a generation ago, right? Right? We know what the solutions are. We just need that political will to make it happen.
Right. And you were mentioning you have a young son, yes?
Yeah, he's 10.
What does he think about you running for Congress?
Oh my
gosh. This is a big deal.
It is a big deal. When I ran for the state senate, he was in kindergarten. And it was during the pandemic, so he had no concept about what I was doing. No concept. But now he's a little older. He's in 4th grade, so he just came to the State House with his class, which was so fun. So I think he's really proud of me, what I'm doing. I think he understands it a little more. It was certainly overwhelming when we took this next step. My husband and I really included him in the conversation because It is going to be a family sacrifice, so it needed to be a family decision. And, we definitely heard from him about his thoughts and how he wanted it to look. He said, I don't want to move to D.C. And I said, that's great. You don't have to move to D.C. But I think he's really excited now, and he's really proud of me.
I think for a lot of people, they don't understand or maybe don't have the concept of how much not just work goes into the campaign, but after you win, especially if you're going into, the national position, you do have to pack up a lot of things and move over to DC. It's a big commitment.
Yeah, and so thankfully, because we're in New Hampshire, you can hop on a plane and then come back.
Right.
And I think that's what a lot of our federal delegation does. They really keep a lot of most routes in New Hampshire, and they try to get back to New Hampshire as much as possible. And we're lucky in that way. We have a great airport in Manchester. And if you go to that Manchester airport, chances are you will see some of our federal
Someone's going to be
delegations.
getting on a flight and going down.
Yeah.
So we're talking about being in Congress and all the things that you are planning to do if you get elected. But what other qualities or experiences do you think someone should have if they're considering running for a position in government?
Yeah, so I think in Congress, what I am excited to bring to the table is just being in the trenches for the past 4 years. I've been a lawmaker. I've been a lawmaker in the minority. I know how to get stuff done. But I think when you're talking about just running for office, there are so many different offices to run for. For example, my husband's on the select board in our town. There's planning boards. There's school boards. There's conservation commissions. So I don't think there's any one quality to run for office, but I think what's important is just that commitment to work hard and want to improve your community. And in my case, want to improve the lives of other people and other families. So I don't think there's one quality. There are a lot of people in politics that are introverts, but they're hard workers. On every single board, you want that workhorse, right? They say in politics, you have the workhorses and the show ponies, right? You can be a little bit of both, but I think anyone who's running for office should just go for it. We need more people stepping up, and we need to support those people.
Exactly. So we're talking about there's not just a singular quality, but if you had to, I guess, say maybe the most important quality, or at least what do you think is the quality that you have that defines you as a politician, what would that be?
Yeah, I think I am a workhorse. It's really hard to outwork me. Once I have it in my head that I want to accomplish something, it's pretty hard to knock me off of that. And it's paid off in the Senate. Once you introduce the bill, you can't just sort of hope and pray it's gonna pass. You really have to work at it. I think the other piece that has really served me well is building relationships, because in the end, other legislators are just people, right? And relationships mean so much when you're legislating and when you're making policy, and even when you're an advocate at the State House, because I need to trust other advocates. I need to trust other legislators because there's so much that comes before us. I don't know everything about everything. So I think building those relationships, learning who you can trust, I think that's a huge piece of it.
I want to circle back to something you were mentioning earlier about that the job you have right now in the New Hampshire Senate is not a paid position. Do you think...
Well, we get $100 a year plus mileage.
$100 a year. $100 a year. But do you believe, obviously, that you don't work in politics for the money? That is not the reason.
No.
But do you think, this is kind of be a bold question, do you think that should be true for all government positions? Do you think that, or obviously to some it might be a benefit, as you said, you're a working mom, you have a family at home that you have to help take care of, but if you're running for office, if you're not caring about the money, is there a point to still having it?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think there's nothing glamorous about being in politics. There's nothing glamorous about, serving in office. And so you really have to be committed to public service and committed to improving your community. And, think about why you're actually there. And why I wanted to be there is because I knew that I had an important role to support other families like mine, other working families, and then other vulnerable communities. There are so many people that do not have a voice in places of power, and we need those people to step up and stand up for them too. And I feel like that has always been my role in the Senate too.
And what do you think would help entice people who might otherwise not be interested in running in politics to do so?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, I think it's nice to see those big victories when we pass a big bill, but that's not every day, right? I learned something when I was a young lawyer doing litigation, trying to make a difference in systemic litigation. I learned that you have to celebrate all the little victories too. And sometimes when you're trying to pass a big piece of policy, when you're trying to solve big problems, it's not overnight. it may take 2 or 3 years to pass a really important policy.
Right.
And again, you're building those relationships. And so I really encourage folks to stay with it and not get disappointed or discouraged if, you may not, get the result you want the first year.
You're not everything you want to get passed is going to get passed.
Right.
You're going to push for a lot of things that
Yep.
might end up, not getting through, and it hurts, but
Yep.
you keep working and you
gotta
keep
keep at
pushing.
it.
You can't stop and be discouraged.
That's right. And for example, my first 2 years in office, I introduced 2 different child care bills, and they weren't successful. But my 3rd year in office, I was able to secure over $60 million for child care in the state budget, just by sharing my own story, sharing the stories of the community, building relationships, starting the Moms Caucus. It takes time, and we were successful. And I think that's a really good example of that.
Eventually, with enough willpower and fortitude, you will get the things you want
And
to accomplish.
tenacity. I taught that word recently to my 10-year-old because he just started playing the trombone. He's in 4th grade, and he really, really wanted to move up to the concert band with the 5th and 6th graders. And he was frustrated because he wasn't immediately really good at trombone. And I said, look, mommy is here not because I'm wildly talented, but I work hard and I have the tenacity to go after those goals. And you know what? That little stinker got up to concert band because he worked at
Right.
it. So we had a really cool conversation about tenacity, and I think tenacity is a quality that can get you pretty far in life.
I'd like to transition over to questions about voting, because I try to mention to people, Youth in the Booth, the name, is like a young person in the podcasting booth and the voting booth.
Yeah.
Because in our country, there is a lack of youth voting and lack of youth participation in our government. And how old were you when you first voted?
That's a great question. I was 18, so it was my first year of college. I went to college in D.C., and what's really wild about my first year of college, it was during the Monica Lewinsky scandal, which was way before your time.
I do know of it, yes.
Okay, so it was wild, and there were impeachment trials going on for the sitting president. And I went to school in D.C., and so I could actually walk and go listen to those impeachment trials. So I think because I was in D.C., I was really attuned to what was going on, and so that was the first election I voted in that fall, and I voted absentee actually from home. But what I really remember, my enduring memory of voting early on is actually going to vote with my mom. I distinctly remember my mom taking me and my sister to the polls and going in that little booth behind that curtain. And I also remember going to town meeting with her, and that really informed how I thought it was done. And I think that's an important thing for parents to pass down to their children. There's a lot of data showing that if your parents vote and they bring you to vote, you're going to vote too. So
there's a lot of benefit of having in the household this kind of education towards voting.
It's a
definitely.
value. Being a citizen and voting is a value that you pass on to your children. And absolutely, I did the same thing to my son. He's come with me every time I voted. And he gets that little sticker.
Oh, yeah, I saw that they made. Did you see the stickers they did this?
Yeah, the
this
4th
last
graders
year?
did it.
The 4th graders. This was so cool.
So great. And they actually, so they chose only about 3 or 4 of them, but all the submissions were lining the tunnel between the legislative office building and the State House. So it was really cool.
Really cool.
Yeah.
So for your campaign, what do you feel like you've done or will do that will appeal to young people who are going to be voting in this next election?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of just getting out there and talking to people, which is what I've always done, and the issues that we're talking about. So we need to be talking about climate. We also need to be talking about the barriers that young people have in starting their life. So what I hear from a lot of young people is that it is completely unaffordable to try to even think about buying a house in New Hampshire or starting a family. There's so many barriers that exist now that didn't exist even when I started my family and my career here. Getting out and talking to people, talking about the issues that they care about. The other, issue that a lot of younger people care about is democracy.
Sure.
Young people care about democracy, and they're scared. They want their elected leaders to make sure that we're preserving our democracy because they know that it's not a guarantee. Right. And I think that's really inspiring.
It is the most powerful tool we have in this country is our vote. Mm-hmm. And I think we're quite lucky to be in a state where they very much value, if you want to speak on it, grassroots campaigns, where you go around and you meet people in local areas and communities and get to know individual voters.
Yeah, absolutely. New Hampshire is really known for civic engagement. And, because of the first in the nation presidential primary, voters expect you to go to them, to ask for their vote, sit in their living room, see them at the farmer's market, which is really cool. It was hard when I was running for office during the pandemic because I couldn't do a lot of those things.
Right.
And I did go to farmers markets and, socially distanced. But I love the fact that New Hampshire voters really want to hear from candidates and they expect to see you in person. And I like that.
Oh, that's great. I'm very lucky to be, grow up in a state like this where I've been able to see multiple presidential candidates. I've seen the president speak before. I've shaken hands with different political leaders, and it's very lucky to be in a state like this.
Yeah.
And I wish that there was this kind of civic engagement across the whole country, because I think here in New Hampshire we have one of the highest voting rates in the country, but in some other places I saw some statistics that, at least for young people in some states, it's less than like 15% from the ages 18 to 29 who vote. And that is scarily low.
Yeah, I think a lot of it too is younger people are really busy starting their lives, right? They're focused on the day to day because they have to be. In New Hampshire, it's still the case that our folks 65 plus, in fact, women 65 plus are our best voters. They have a little more space in their life. Right. But I think, you and other young people are making that case to people that, your vote means a whole heck of a lot and it's going to impact your day to day life. And I think it's just having those individual conversations. When you go to vote, bring a couple of your friends, an afternoon, make it into something fun. So that's what it's going to take.
Right. Just exactly related to that. And how can we address these barriers that we're seeing with young people not voting, and especially related to a lack of information and even just interest in general?
I think in terms of voting, I think we need to make it easier for people to vote. Right? Yeah. Here in New Hampshire, there's a lot of barriers to ensuring that every single eligible voter vote. There are so many things we can do in New Hampshire that we have tried, but we have been blocked from, to make it easier to vote, right? And I think that would go a long way to getting younger people able to exercise their vote. We got to remove those barriers. And I think in terms of interest, I think it's having younger people run for office, right? If people can see themselves in their elected officials, I think that's going to go a long way. And I think it's ensuring that, politicians, anyone who's running for office is talking to young people and making sure that we are hearing from them the issues that they care about. It's all about listening. I got to tell you, what I learned when I was running for office is that people just want to be listened to. They don't necessarily want to hear my policy position on every single issue. They want to be listened to. And I think that's the most important thing we can do.
Just exactly relating to that, what have you done so far? You've said you've been walking around and talking to people. Has it been a lot of young people as well that you've been having these dialogues with?
Yeah, so my goal was really to talk not necessarily to just the Democratic activists, right? Those people are important. They are, building our movement in the communities. But I wanted to talk to a lot of the people who are impacted by the policies and the issues I think that we're going to be talking about on this campaign and in this election. Reproductive freedom, for example. So one of my first visits was to the Equality Health Center in Concord to talk to the providers there and what it's been like since the barrage of attacks on reproductive freedom. I was down in Keene talking to activists and folks that are working in the community to address economic development, to address housing shortages, to address childcare shortages. And I was up recently in Gorham talking to a childcare center and a pre-K program. I was talking to the only pre-K program in Coas County.
Oh, wow.
Which is a big problem. I think our rural communities are experiencing what we're experiencing, down in the southern part of the state, but just in an extreme way. It's very important for me to get to those parts of the state because they feel ignored, right? I think they feel ignored. I also was invited to go up to the Dartmouth Dems. They were awesome. They had a million questions for me. It was like rapid fire, but I loved it.
And that's a place where you see a lot of young people. It's a college. And
they love it.
And I think it's one of the schools I've heard that has quite a lot of civic engagement at it. I mean,
and they asked really hard questions. They knew, young people are paying attention. They knew what the issues are, and they wanted to hear my answer, and I loved it.
Obviously, Dartmouth is in Hanover. It's one of your many cities and towns that you have covering your party, because what you're running for covers half the state, if I'm correct, right?
That's right. It's a big district. So I have a lot, Keene and Nashua and Concord and Plymouth and Hanover and Lebanon. It's really exciting. And then the North Country, Littleton, Gorham. So yeah, there are a lot of cities, but a lot of different types of communities, right? Because our rural communities, even in the southwestern part of the state, they're experiencing different challenges than, the North Country. And I think it's important to talk to those voters as well.
And you think you can bring that idea of unifying all voters to a national level?
Yeah, and of course we need to talk about what's happening in Congress. We need to talk about why there is dysfunction, and I truly believe it is really those extreme MAGA Republicans. But what people really want to hear is solutions. They want to hear what you're going to do to help improve their lives and help them pay their bills. That's what people want to talk about,
right.
And that's what I plan to talk about.
Exactly. And the role of people who are in our government is to represent the people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Becky, for coming on. I really appreciate it.
This was a pleasure. Thank you.
Youth in the Booth is recorded here at Concord Community Television Studios at Concord High School. If you're interested in seeing more from my podcast, you can check out my Instagram at Youth in the Booth Podcast, or check out the website www.youthinthebooth.com.